questions about that, you know, unless the team shouts out or I hear someone's voice, I'll just keep going, but do feel free to stop me. The next element, again, we've talked about, the SWER Center has released its engagement guidelines for the fall of 2020. This and the next set of policies I'm about to show you, you'll note, are for the fall of 2020. This is intentional. We're trying to take this one step at a time in terms of our planning and in terms of being attentive to changing public health circumstances. That's both at the SWER Center and the university level. So you'll you know, notice as we go a lot of this information, we're saying this is what's happening for the fall. And even in real time within the fall, we'll be actively updating these guidelines, but certainly for the spring, we'll be revisiting all of these questions with up-to-date information, and then transitioning and then updating any information that would apply for the spring of 2021. The big thing to note, which we've talked about, I'm sorry, is that all engagement will be virtual. The students will not be permitted to gather in any SWER spaces. 2 Stimson Avenue, the SWER Center offices will essentially be closed. We may have mentioned it at the last meeting, but we have just received word as staff of the college, the academic unit of the university, that only the most essential staff will be expected to return to campus in the fall, but telecommuting will continue for most staff who don't fall into those precisely essential categories, and that includes the SWER Center staff. But you know, we'll be here for you via Zoom as much as possible, you as well as students, and we'll be updating all of this again as we go. I'm drawing our attention now to the extracurricular activities policy for the fall. This is a broader institutional activities policy developed and managed by our Student Activities Office. As I mentioned earlier, some of you may interface specifically through our Community Core program with student groups like BEAM, for example, or HOPE. And so along with the SWER guidelines, this set of policies will also be applicable to those students. And so, you know, this is a longer document, and I didn't want to sort of be walking through each bullet with folks. This will be shared with you. But I did want to draw your attention to a couple of things. You know, I think that would be of note to the student groups with whom you work, and you as well. So guests, guest speakers, performers, these 2 bullets that I've highlighted, will not be permitted to be invited to campus. This SAO Activities Office, our office, are really encouraging students not to host these gatherings, which can be so, you know, enriching and supporting for the work and for the sort of community that they're trying to build with you and with each other, but to move as many things to virtual as possible, and to really engage with SWER staff and Student Activities Office staff for support in planning these events. We understand that this is a shift for everybody, and so staff are here and ready to dedicate time to supporting those kinds of activities. The other thing that I draw your attention to is this part of the policy, which indicates to students that off-campus travel for group activity and events is not permitted. If you anticipate that this will be an issue, that there will need to be exceptions, or if you come to understand that students are sort of doing it anyway, please talk to us. You know, we're not trying to take a sort of overly prohibitive and certainly not sort of punitive approach to this, but we want to sort of really lean into our commitment to keeping everyone on campus safe, but you know, the greater Providence community and our neighbors safe as well. I'll pause there just briefly to invite, you know, again, any questions that folks might have. All right, so I have just 3 more quick things, and then, you know, I won't take up the floor much longer. The next piece has to do with our student BCI process. So again, this will all be shared with you, but, you know, we've been made to understand through the Attorney General's office that a BCI check will be required even if students are engaging virtually. And so we've had some great folks on the team in collaboration with some folks from the Annenberg Institute for School Reform, really working to make an e-notary, electronic virtual notary and BCI process possible. This document contains information about the steps that students will be required to complete. We're sharing this with you as well so that you know, so that if there are any questions raised, you have the information as well. But, you can always refer students back to the folks at the Swearer Center if it seems like they're having trouble navigating these steps. We have a couple of dedicated team members who'll be working on this process. I would also just note really quickly that as part of this process, there is an alternative BCI process if there is some reason that students are not able to engage in the e-notary process. The one that we can anticipate at the moment is that the platform that we're needing to use in order to make the e-notary process possible requires either a driver's license and state ID and social security number. Historically, students have been able to get a BCI with something like a passport. That's not possible with this new process. So if that's the only form of identification that students have available to them is that passport, for example, there's an alternative process where they will be able to come in and have a sort of in-person, a sort of hybrid in-person virtual process in order to get their BCI. So we're thinking about that and trying to make allowances for that as well. Any questions on the BCI? Okay.
Yeah, I do have a question on the BCI. It's Kim Reel from the Met. We require a national background check. Is this process, your BCI process, go through the state or a national database?
Yeah, unfortunately, it does not, is the short answer to your question. Unfortunately, at the moment, the state BCI through the Attorney General's office is the only BCI, is the only sort of background check that we are sort of set up to provide to students. I would love to have a chat with you myself or a member of my team to figure out for the students who may be volunteering with you how we might support that process. But currently and historically, we haven't provided a national check.
Okay.
Thank you for that very good question. Anything else about that BCI process? Okay. So the next thing I'm going to show on screen is an updated version of a document that may be familiar to many of you if you've hosted a Bonner Fellow or an iProf student, or if you hosted a Sprint student this summer. This is our position description template. And I wanted to just walk through it very briefly with folks in this moment to highlight, some of the additional language we sort of added to the template just to give folks context for how we're all going to be working. Those of you who may already have been in contact or meeting with Nadia and Elena may have seen this or been talking through how you'll use this template to update your Bonner Fellows position description in this new time of virtual engagement, or maybe your Community Core work study fellows work, for the same reason. So, the template starts off just giving the contextual information, the things we just talked through, the plan, the Swearer Center guidelines, the BCI policies are linked. We've shared on this second page that I'm hoping everyone can still see a few sort of broad examples of the kinds of capacity building roles that we know or we've experienced have sort of lent themselves to virtual engagement. So, we just tried to integrate into this tool, some more language, some more resources, some more sort of direction, if it's helpful, about, if you had your students doing more direct engagement work, if you're looking to shift that, what are some of the bodies of work that might be useful for your organization that you might want to pivot to? We've also linked a few sample virtual position descriptions that were created for our summer sprint program this past cycle. It's actually still wrapping up for many folks right now. So, to sort of give even further nuance to what that might look like, we've linked those there. And that was something that someone did ask about explicitly in our last CPN meeting. So we want to make them available here. And again, this will be shared out. And then to the meat of the position description itself, you know, obviously we asked for some straightforward information about the organization, who the supervisor is, position titles. We've added some clarifying information where we're sort of indicating what the what the terms are for this coming academic year, and asking you to indicate, you know, for which of these terms do you expect this position to be carried out. We also understand, for those of you who have worked with our various programs, you know that our community course students, the average engagement for them has been between 2 to 3 hours a week. For our Bonner Community Fellows, their expectation is that they do 6 to 8 hours a week of engagement. We know that just may not work for you now in a sort of virtual reality. So we put that information there, but we also ask you to say, realistically for this position, going into this next academic year, how many hours, you know, of work a week would you be looking for a student to engage in that role? You know, we asked some other information. If it's, some of this will be adapted depending on which kind of position you're going for. This is a more generalized template, but if it's a community core position and you're willing to engage an off-campus federal work study eligible student, you'll need to set a wage, as some of you know. If you're looking to bring multiple students into a community core role, you can let us know how many slots might be available. You know, and then we ask, you know, for the things you might imagine, just to sort of lay out a more traditional position description. What are the objectives? What are the required and preferred qualifications? We've always asked about sort of trainings. How do you plan to onboard the students in the role? And are there sort of issue area or content area specific trainings related to your very specific work that you're offering to them, so you know they're doing your work well? This, as always, will be complementary to the community engagement co-curriculum and the trainings that we offer at the Swearer Center to students through that co-curriculum. You know, we ask about supervision and how you plan to structure that. You know, especially in a time of virtual engagement, we want to make sure that we're supporting whatever is needed to make sure that that student is able to access, and you are able to offer that regular supervision support to students. We're also inquiring, as you can see here, about, are there any sort of new tools, or, you know, maybe not new, but, you know, that are going to be used more frequently to engage with students? Zoom, WebEx, Google Hangouts. You know, where right now, for example, with Zoom, your engaged Brown students have access to a sort of version of Zoom with more features through the university. You know, some organizations may have access to that as well. Some may be using the sort of I forget if they call it the basic version or the introductory version, which does have some limitations to it. So, you know, we want to get a better understanding of what you might be using, and if there are opportunities for us to make sure that students are leaning in to use the tools that they may have access to make that work more manageable. And then, of course, any additional information that you want to include. One more thing, the last thing that I'll draw attention to with this document is, you know, we've stated in the guidelines that that all engagement must be remote. We are looking through this process for a bit of an affirmation from you that the position is in fact remote. And so sort of documenting that in the position description, just through checking a box, is one of the other pieces that we'll ask of folks. Any questions about that? Hopefully that feels straightforward, because it may feel familiar to many of you, the use of that template. We're just trying to put a slightly finer point on making sure in one place we have all of the information, both us, the Swearer Center, and you and the student, about what the position is going to be and what the expectations are. Then my final item before I turn it over to my colleague, Julie, is our community advisory board, and you all can see my screen, I'm not seeing faces, so we may have some members of the advisory board in the room. But the advisory board would like to offer, going into this next academic year, access to mindfulness-based stress reduction programming to members of the network who are interested. Those of you who were with us, I think 2 meetings ago, might remember that we had a visitor from the Mindfulness Center who walked us through, you know, what I thought was a very nice explanation of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and a little exercise that, you know, folks could sort of engage in right then, and perhaps some have sort of taken it in as part of a short practice that they've done since we were all together. And so the advisory board is vetting a number of organizations that offer sort of employee wellness programming, and are really interested in getting a sense of whether or not folks in the network, that's something that you or you believe your organization would like to take advantage of. I'm happy to go deeper and answer, you know, some more questions about that, but it's sort of a more information to come situation that we'll put that out very shortly. But if folks will indulge me, this is you know, I'm going to ask if folks can just do a sort of raise of hand, whether with the reaction tab or if you're on screen raising your hand. This is a soft, non-committal poll, just to get a sense of if that's something that folks in the network might take advantage of, time allowing and all of that, if the Community Advisory Board were to make that available to folks. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. I'm seeing some raised hands in the comments. Excellent. You know, I appreciate that. Again, more information to come about the ways to plug in. Obviously, anything that the advisory board would want to make available to you, we would fashion it so that it, you know, meets your time frame and needs for all of the logistics. And you know, it was really important for the advisory board to think about offering a resource that sort of honored, I'm trying to sort of recall the precise word, but sort of honored the really challenging work that you all are engaged in every day, especially during this time, and giving so much to the communities and clients that your organizations serve, but also holding space for yourselves. All right. That is the end of my spiel. I promise you won't hear my voice very much more for the rest of this meeting. I'm thrilled to turn it over to my colleague who I see is in the room, Julie Plout, our Director of Engaged Scholarship. You know, again, as we transition into this time of remote engagement, we're not just thinking about how do the students, how we're going to shift the work that the students that you're engaging with are doing, but how can we really leverage other elements of the work of the Swearer Center and the university. And so Julie's work through Engaged Scholarship is one that we've sort of talked about before in the Engaged Scholarship space, but wanted to invite her back in to talk more about some of the Engaged coursework and Engaged faculty work that she's doing that may be of interest to folks. And we'd love to sort of start a conversation with anyone who's interested to create some pathways for you to plug into that more intentionally, potentially coming up in the very near term. So I hand it off to you, Julie, with that.
Thanks, Ashley, and good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be with you in the way that we can be together. As Ashley said, my role encompasses both the work supporting faculty who are interested in doing community engaged teaching or research, and also Swearer's programs that engage undergraduates as part of their coursework. So you may be familiar with the Engaged Scholars program or the Brown and Washington program. I've been here 2 years and I still feel very much like a newcomer getting to know this place. So I greatly appreciate your knowledge of the local communities and your commitment to co-educating students as collaborative change makers. If you take only one thing away from my being here today, please know that I, as well as the community partnership team, really welcome questions, ideas, suggestions. If you have a project that you really would like done and don't have the time to do and think perhaps a course or a team of students would be interested, or one really capable student, I welcome those project ideas. If you're pleased with or concerned about the way a faculty member is sending students into a community organization, or anything positive or challenging, again, just really happy to connect with you and want to be supporting respectful and effective engagement by students and faculty. And as you know, we're not in control of everybody, and sometimes people are doing things we don't know about, and sometimes those things are great, and sometimes those things might be problematic. And so just please consider us allies and resources in navigating relationships with others. So a few practical things to know about what we're doing on the Engaged Scholarship team. One is that, similar to the community partnership newsletter that Ashley and team send out, we send out a monthly newsletter to engaged faculty that goes to about 300 people. So if there are public events, if there are opportunities for partnering, if there are existing things you're doing that you think could be of interest and spotlighted, please feel free to email me. We always welcome content from you. For this year only, we're awarding $4,000 engaged course development grants that are focused on the kind of capacity building work that Ashley was just outlining earlier. And one of the expenses that can be included in those grants is paying community partners to collaborate with the faculty on developing and implementing those courses. So if you have, again, an interest of any kind in partnering with a course around the kind of engaged research or capacity building tasks that were on that template form, please let us know. Ashley and I are going to be keeping a running list and trying to really encourage faculty to respond to interests that you all have as they think about opportunities in their courses. One program that Julius Kolawole, who I saw on the call, he and Michelle Duso were partners this last year in developing a new undergraduate fellows program where students will be matched with faculty and supporting engaged courses. So they'll be, to some extent, supporting communications with partners and mentoring students and doing their engaged work as part of the course. And so we're excited to have that, to be mobilizing students as leaders and partners in doing this work. So just know if you encounter somebody in that role, that CBLR fellowship is something new that we're also hoping will encourage students to continue engagement with the same partner beyond the scope of the course. So we're hoping that the students are really going to be encouraging long-term commitments from students. And then we also, as I mentioned, the Engaged Scholars Program, it's a multi-year program in which students are taking courses that relate to their interests and doing a substantial community-based practicum, as well as a capstone project that often includes research. And so just a few examples of what they've done that might spark your own ideas of how folks might contribute. One student with the Children's Hospital researched the impact of music therapy interventions on symptom management in participants with cancer. With the Rhode Island Foundation, a student researched the latest theories and practices in management and governance of nonprofits to offer recommendations for their Initiative for Nonprofit Excellence program. With the Refugee Dream Center, a student investigated the experiences of refugees in Providence and produced short video interviews for them. With the Providence Public Library, a student developed a handbook for librarians to use for transforming digital literacy programs into broader digital justice initiatives. And a student with the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence helped develop a nonpartisan policy agenda regarding juvenile justice in Rhode Island that was delivered to the governor. And so, there's a wide range of issues that students are interested in, that faculty are interested in, and so, again, are just really eager to be supporting partnerships that are not only contributing to the goals of folks on campus, but are really advancing your own work and not burdening you with extensive oversight, and aren't necessarily taking the form of the kind of weekly commitment that Community Core and Bonner and so forth, but are really more project-based and allow you to certainly guide and shape the project, but allow the students to run with it in a way. And there are also courses that take that approach. And one, for instance, that we're in communication with, the computer science department has a CS for social change course that's offered regularly and is quite popular. And they're always seeking to complete projects that have a positive social impact. And they also have other courses that are increasingly interested in doing projects with a community-oriented component. And so last spring, for instance, a team of students who worked with the Brown University Policy Lab supported the Metropolitan Government of Central Falls in developing a web application to translate government documents into multiple languages. And so web applications and other sort of technological projects are something that they have, the CS department, which is very large, has a real interest in developing like projects for, with partners. And so Ashley and I are going to be talking with the department chair about how can we best leverage that sort of energy and skill to benefit local partners. And so again, if there are ways in which you think technology might help you in your mission, like please let us know. We're very interested in taking advantage of that resource. But there are also courses that take more of the sort of weekly approach, some of them with schools. For instance, there's a birding communities class that a history and environmental studies professor teaches, where elementary kids have been not only learning about birding and looking at birds, but also talking, for instance, about migration, and not only bird migration, but reflecting on family stories of migration. Or there's a literary arts professor who has been engaging students with school children to read and write poetry. So there are sort of ongoing formats too, but oftentimes at least in my early years, I feel like I'm finding the project orientation is a little bit more successful, not only with courses, but also, again, we're engaging students through their own individual projects with the Engaged Scholars Program, and oftentimes have found that a student who does a capstone with an organization can continue and do a capstone project with them as well. So those are just a few things that I thought might be useful, but I don't know if you have questions. We have a few minutes, I think, if any of you have any comments, questions that that I might answer now. And of course, I will just type in the chat my email, because as I said, I very much welcome questions, ideas, or connections beyond this morning. Ashley, anything important that I missed?
I think you've covered everything, and it's really fantastic. I'm just watching the chat box and the faces a bit if I'm seeing any raised hands. Maybe the only thing that I'll do, and which is really just sort of co-signing the very good points that you made, Julie, is, we on the community partnership team know from experience that sometimes, you as, partners or other organizations come to us and they have really amazing, exciting projects that they're looking, for sort of collaboration around, but they don't quite fit the model for any number of reasons of programs like Bonner and Community Core, or again, going into these new and exciting times. I'm going to go with new and exciting for the moment. That project that may have been on the back burner, that data set that you've had, looking for some work or some analysis of this, this could be the moment, and it could be, as Julie described, through something like an Engaged Scholarship collaboration, or a collaboration with a faculty member in research to really sort of untangle the layers of that, and in a way that, you know, again, I think would be, I'll say, less taxing, you know, for lack of a better term, in the moment on you as an organization, because there would not be the same, as Julie said, level of supervision and you're figuring out meeting a certain number of hours per week. That expectation wouldn't be there for you as the partner. You know, in some instances, in theory, you could sort of hand off a data set and, you know, give your parameters and say, you know, let's check in a couple of weeks or a few weeks, you know, or someone might ping you if they have a particular question. But it really opens up, I think, an opportunity with more flexibility. So, you know, we hope you'll think about it. We hope those examples were useful. We'll share them out with you. And so perhaps folks can sort of ruminate on it and let us know. And going forward, we're going to be looking to more intentionally gather these kinds of ideas with you as they come up, so that hopefully we can sort of build an active repository so that, you know, if Julie and her team are working with an engaged scholar or approached by a faculty member who's looking for collaboration and we see some synergy between a project that a partner has spoken to us about, we can more quickly, you know, and more naturally sort of make that connection and help to get that collaboration going.
Thanks to those of you who've privately chatted with me to express interest. So we will definitely follow up on those. And like Ashley said, welcome ideas and connections later as well. Thank you all very, very much for having me and for all the work that you do towards justice.
I guess I just have one question on the program, if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all.
I'm Maxwell, by the way. I'm one of the community partners with Beat the Streets. So I guess relating to this kind of like your program acting as the liaison between you know, faculty and student engagement and the community partners. I was just curious how, like, if we were to present maybe a project of some sort to like a specific course, how that like project would be integrated into the curriculum and like synopsis. Like, do you think it would be reciprocated well? And like, how do they allocate, you know, students to that specific? Is it like on a specific project by project basis, or do you think you could just give me a little more insight into how that kind of develops and how that works, please?
Sure, of course. It's a really good question. And I would say that in some ways, the challenge in integrating projects in courses is that oftentimes it's helpful to develop that plan well in advance of the course being offered. So there are certainly courses like the CS for Social Change course where they know they're going to have teams of students who are doing projects, and so they might be sort of recruiting projects up to the last minute. But when you want to very thoughtfully align like students' skills along with projects and make sure that the projects are feasible in the time frame and so forth, it does take some advanced planning. And so in an ideal world, what happens is, you know, say if you had a project that you wanted to share with us next week, it's far enough before the fall semester that we might be able to, if there's a really good match with a faculty member's course and they're teaching a course in the fall that that could be a good fit, and they're already sort of either they have taught engaged courses before, or they know something that could really cause them to adapt fairly quickly. Like, I think we could, you know, it's possible something could happen this fall, but oftentimes it's more like, oh, this person isn't teaching the relevant class until the spring semester. So there's this question of, is the project a good, you know, can you wait, or should we be trying to see if there's another way we could be addressing that project? You know, so I think timing is often a challenge, just because, you know, often you want, there are deadlines and you're focused on what you need to do now, quite legitimately, and faculty sometimes are like planning out for the longer term. So I think that's one of the challenges. But that's why I think people in our kinds of positions, where at least we're trying to broker the relationships and make things happen more quickly than they might if it were, you know, if it were just you trying to find the person on campus who might respond, that we can survey, like, who are all the different people who might be able to work with you on that particular project. And then the way faculty tend to integrate them into courses is, you know, oftentimes it's either students are all doing something very similar, or there's a set of different projects and teams of students are working on particular projects. And so sometimes, like, if there's a partner that wants a marketing plan, it's possible that the class could have 5 different teams that all produce different versions of a marketing plan, and you can, you know, incorporate the best elements of each of them, or sometimes they're doing different things. But usually at Brown, when projects are integrated in courses, they're required assignments, not optional assignments. But the specific way that they're integrated can vary. Does that answer your question, or are there elements that I missed that I can add?
Oh, no, 110% answered it. I appreciate it. That's, yeah, pretty much the one word that you mentioned was like deadline. So it needs to be done before the semester, right? I didn't know if it was like real time, you know, that would be tough to, you know, make happen in real time, to adjust on the fly like that.
Right. I think timelines are often the hardship. And oftentimes if students aren't quite able to complete something within the semester, they're sometimes able to extend a little bit more and respond if, you know, if they present what they have at the end of the semester to the instructor and the partner, and the partner says, well, I'd really appreciate X, Y, and Z being sort of tweaked a little bit or something, you know, that students will oftentimes feel a sense of ownership and commitment that then they can do something a little bit beyond the semester. But to the extent possible, yeah, having the projects be feasible within a semester is helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned your ideal world. So like in a partner's ideal world, could we like potentially maybe shoot you, you know, like a list of projects, and then you're like, oh shoot, this course looks maybe like a good match, right?
Yep. That's, you know, it's one of those things where we can't guarantee that we can recruit someone to respond to every project, but the more we know about projects that you have, what you would, you know, and you can prioritize them. You can give us any like important dates if there are deadlines, you know, and we can take all of that into account as we're working both with faculty and with students in our programs to respond to those. Because you know, we just recruited 50 new Engaged Scholar participants this spring, and, you know, they'll be looking for practicums, they'll be looking for capstone projects down the line. So we have, you know, there are certainly individual students in addition to faculty that we're working with.
No, that's exciting. Thank you very much for the explanation. Sorry to take up everyone else's time, but it seems like a great resource. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, Julie, thank you so much for being with us and sharing that. I'm excited that you were getting some private messages in the chat. Please feel free to send to either Julie or a member of the community partnership team any questions or sort of follow-up that you may have. We'd love to jump into a deeper discussion with folks about these opportunities to collaborate on the Engaged Scholarship side. We are at 9:56, so we're right at the wrap up of this sort of first hour of being together. I will make one final ask that if you weren't able to put your name and organization in the chat at the beginning, just help us keep attendance, drop it in there now for us so that we have that record of you. We will transition shortly to our first sort of programmatic orientation session, which will focus on community core. For those of you who will be staying with us through that, just stay right in this meeting. We'll take a little bit of a break, but ask folks to sort of be back and ready for us at 10. If you'll be leaving us and rejoining for a later session, just a reminder that we'll transition to our discussion of the Bonner Community Fellows Program at 10:45. And for those of you who are VISTA partners, 11:15 is when we're coming together to discuss VISTA with Nadia. Okay. Any final thoughts, questions? So thank you, everybody. We're going to we'll be right here, the team, but we're just going to give it a 3-minute pause if anyone needs to get up and stretch. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Nadia, who'll share her screen, and we'll begin at 10, our deeper dive into Community Core.
Thank you, Ashley. I'll start at 10 o'clock.
For those of us who can maybe still hear on audio, I'll just make a quick plug because I got a very good question in the chat privately, which is, can you participate in these breakout sessions if you're not currently partnered with us through the program? And the answer is absolutely. If you just want to learn more about the program, you're thinking about it, if not for this semester, for a future semester, join us, ask the questions you'll want to ask. It'll actually be a good opportunity because you'll likely be in a room with a concentration of folks who've worked with us in those programs. So you can not just get our perspective, but you can hear from folks who are, engaging with us through that program right now and sort of pull some perspective from them as well.